These notes just recap a little bit about what we've learned with ratios. Lesson 1.5 is just applying what we've learned to solve ratio problems. So remember, we can use double number lines, bar diagrams, which were kind of like the tape diagrams, and proportions to solve for equivalent ratios. Now, I just want to go over proportions a little bit. So remember, a proportion is basically an equivalent ratio, which means that you multiply or divide the top numbers by the same thing, that you multiply or divide the bottom numbers by the same thing. So in this example, we do 2 times 3 to get 6 and 4 times 3 to get 12. So that would be a proportion. You multiply by the same thing. And then same with the other example. All right, so on this slide, I'm going over just a review of solving with proportions or solving for equivalent ratios. Now, I have the steps written up here. I'm not going to go through those step by step. I'm going to show them down below in the example. So this example says the ratio of boys to girls in the class is 1 to 2. If there are 6 boys in the class, how many girls are there? So first we need to figure out our labels. So we are comparing boys to girls. So over here in the proportion, I did boys to girls, boys over girls. Now it tells us that ratio is 1 to 2. So 1 boy for every 2 girls. So in the proportion down below, the first fraction that I've written, or the first ratio I've written here, is 1 on top because that number goes with boys, and 2 on bottom because that number goes with girls. Now it tells us that there are 6 boys in the class. So that 6 goes on top because the boys are on top in that ratio. And then we are trying to figure out how many girls there are. So we can use an X, which we haven't done this very much, but we can use an X to show that unknown. Like we are solving for girls, we don't know what that is. So you could solve this as the proportion and just know like 1 times 6 gives me 6. So 2 times 6 would give me 12. And there would be 12 girls if there were 6 boys. We also use this table just as like a little graphic organizer to help you solve it. So our boy to girl ratio was 1 to 2. I know 1 times 6 gives me 6 boys. That means I have to multiply the bottom by 6, and that would give me 12 girls. So same thing, just 2 different ways to show it. Now I want to point out that you have to make sure the labels line up. So because the boys were on top in this ratio, both numbers on top in the fractions have to represent boys. So if you wrote boys to girls was 1 over 2, and then that equals x over 6, that would be incorrect because the 6 has to go up with the boys because that's talking about 6 boys. So you just have to make sure your numbers match your labels. One other thing I just wanted to show you, that's kind of a little hint if you want to check your work. So once you solve a proportion and find the answer, we can use cross multiplying to check to make sure that it's true. So for example, over here, if I had the proportion 9 over 15 equals x over 5, I first have to figure out how do I go from 15 to 5. So in this problem, I'm doing 15 divided by 3 gives me 5, and that's just what's shown here. So that means I have to do 9 divided by 3, and that's going to give me 3 on the top. So that's just what I show over here. X equals 3, that unknown equals 3. Now if I rewrite that, I have 9 over 15, I'm just looking over here where it says check it, equals 3 over 5, because that 3 is what we just solved for. If we do cross multiplying, which is the butterfly method where we just circle these, I'm going to multiply those together. 9 times 5 gives me 45. And then 15 times 3 gives me 45. If those numbers are the same, that means you solved it correctly, and those are equivalent ratios. So let's practice this. Let's first figure out the unknown variable, like the unknown that's in this proportion, and then we're going to use cross multiplying to solve this. So I know that 5 times 6 gives me 30. So on the bottom, I have to do 2 times 6, which gives me 12. So now I have 5 over 2 equals 30 over 12. I'm going to do cross multiplying, or the butterfly method. 5 times 12 equals 60. 2 times 30 equals 60. Because those are equal, that means I've solved it correctly. All right, over here, I know that 4 times 5 gives me 20. 9 times 5 gives me 45. So I have 9 over 4 equals 45 over 20. If I'm going to use cross multiplying to check my work here, I need to do 9 times 20. I know 9 times 2 is 18, so since it's times 20, that would just be a 0 there. And then 45 times 4, if you didn't know that off the top of your head, you could just do this off to the side, and you get 180. So since those numbers are both the same when I cross multiplied, that means I've solved it correctly.